up here today. One, I'm just going to tell a couple stories that are from the book, and the other is I'm going to try to get us back on track on time. So probably won't be more than 10 or 12 minutes here. I wrote this book about, I think 2.5 years ago. It's published, it's on Amazon, and really trying to figure out why there's such a gap between leaders in companies and the employees that they have working for them. And first story I'll tell is, how many of you guys have kids? So I've started a bunch of companies. The first one got up to 23 million and then ran it into the dirt in the dot-com bust. And then the next couple actually did pretty well, but my kids didn't see the company that went under. They only saw the ones that went well. And I realized that at the dinner table, every time when I came home, we were mostly discussing things that happened at work that were really good, right, and were great. And I decided that my kids, when we were talking about like things they wanted to buy or things that they wanted to get, like they always thought we were in a super good position, so they just thought they were entitled to get everything. And I started going home and I started only sharing the things that happened at work that were bad at the dinner table. And I would ask them what they thought about that. And I'd ask them what their opinion is or what they thought I should do. And it had this really interesting effect. We started to talk about what would happen if Daddy lost his job, what would happen if we ran out of money, how do credit cards work, how do loans work, all of these kind of really cool conversations that I have 3 boys and a little girl, and I have one on the way now, and just not conversations you're used to having with 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. So fast forward about a month, and financially, the family's doing very well. My son comes to dinner and he's like, "You're never going to believe what happened. My coach in soccer, he just invited me to go play in Europe for 2 weeks." And his name is Mason. I was like, "Oh, Mason, that's so cool. Like, I'm so excited for you." I was like, "Are you stoked?" And he's like, "Well, I said I couldn't go." And I was like, "Why'd you say that?" He's like, I don't think we could pay for it." And I was like, "Are you kidding?" He's like, "No, well, you've just been talking about how hard work is and all these things that are going on. And I just didn't think we would pay for it. So I told him that we couldn't go." I was like, "Mason, look," then I realized I might have overdone it. And I was like, "Look, I'll handle all of that, but let's talk about actually doing this trip." And he ended up, for a bunch of reasons, not going. But it was amazing to me what happens when you start sharing risk with people. So that story really plays exactly the same way in corporate America, right, with corporations. We as leaders fear going to our team and telling them we might be in trouble. We fear telling them like what might be wrong with the business. When we have layoffs in organizations or rifts in organizations, what does leadership usually do? How do you usually know a riff is coming, right? All of a sudden there's a ton of closed door meetings and like everybody's freaking out, nobody knows what's going on. What we found is that if you share the risk with your teams, and we found this via POPin, the company I run now, if you share it in intelligent ways, if you let the team tell you where the roadblocks are, if you let the team tell you where you've got issues with the projects that you're running, and you admit that you don't know everything, really great things can happen. And employees will stop being entitled and will stop acting, like your kids do when they think, money grows on trees. They'll actually start problem solving with you. So I'd highly encourage you, if you're running groups, to really focus on sharing the risk around the things that are burdening you as a leader, and it will draw your team to you very well. And then really, if you think about what your superpower is as a leader, and this is where crowdsourcing really plays, it's admitting you don't know everything. Like, no one of us is smarter than all of us, right? And so most leaders want to get up on stage and they want to say they have the answer to everything. And I think one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader is do the exact opposite. Instead of getting up in front of your teams and telling them you know everything, go ahead and give them your perspective on stuff. And then crowdsource before you speak to them, hey, what's top of mind for you guys, right? I covered some of that this morning. And it's amazing. Leaders, if you've ever had this, right, where you go into the kitchen and you've got a bunch of employees in the kitchen, they talk water cooler talk. When the boss walks into the kitchen, when there's like 10 employees in the kitchen and there was all this talking, what happens when the boss walks in? all the talking stops, right? It's like water cooler talk. Like you never have any access to the water cooler talk. So what we were able to do with our platform, right, was we can actually get access to that, and we can figure out what's top of mind for the employees, what are the things they're worried about, because anonymously on POPin, they can tell you that. And then when you get up, you don't want to get up and say how all your water cooler talk is stupid, or like, I don't agree with any of this, or I know how to solve all those problems. A lot of times all you want to do is just get up and give your perspective. And now all of a sudden you're one of them, right? So admitting you don't know everything, asking them, hey, if you guys were in charge, how would you solve these problems? Those are all things that are going to make you a powerful leader, right? And if you think about entitlement, right? If you don't share any risk with your group, then it's not their fault they're entitled. You've made them that way. By sharing risk, you'll overcome that. By listening, you will overcome apathy. And those are two of the things I think for leaders that it's the hardest to overcome. So in the book, I couldn't believe the publisher actually let me do this, but this was the title of the 4th chapter in the book. And I love this image. I tell this story about being on a stage like this. There were quite a few more people in the audience, but there were about 800 people in the audience. I was like on the right side over here, and a guy's on stage, and he's got a slide up, and the slide has like 8-point font, and there's like 20 bullets on the slide. And he turns around like this, butt to the crowd, and is reading every single one of the bullets. And that's how he's doing his presentation. And I'm sitting over there, kind of like where you are. And I'm sitting over here, and it's like, you two right here are talking, and you're like, oh my God, this is the worst presentation I've ever heard. This is so terrible. Can you even believe he's reading the slides? This is so awful. And I'm you. And then the guy comes off stage after he's done with maybe the worst presentation I've ever seen. And he comes down and he sits right there. And he goes, hey, what'd you think? And what did you say? It was great, right? And I'm looking at him and I'm like, how could you say that? They're like, what? I'm not going to be a jerk, right? Well, it turns out like that's exactly what everyone says when you speak. You get off stage and they say it's great. And that could be in a presentation like this, or that could be rolling out like a $10 million initiative as a leader in an organization. And you roll it out and you give your pitch up here and you're excited and you're like, man, we are going to kill this thing. And I walk over there and I'm like, how did I do? Do you think the team's going to do it? Oh, yeah, it was great, right? And it's awful. And so we really have to figure out how to overcome that, right? Whoa, this clicker is so touchy. So top-down communication in organizations, management versus employees. I don't know if it's management's fault that nothing ever works, right? Because, you just lied to me, right? So how do you get the truth out of organizations? So what we figured out how to do, create a crowdsourcing platform, and we have two options. You can like show names when you ask questions, like, hey, that thing I just rolled out on stage, do you guys think it's actually going to work? And if the names are showing, everyone says, yeah, it sounds great. We've tested this. If you do it anonymously, they'll point out the 20 things that'll stop it from working. You'll figure out where the roadblocks are. You'll figure out how the ops team feels that this one process is never going to fly because of some policy that we have in place. And you can actually get to the truth of what's going on. So if you're in an organization where all the communication is going one way, just know your failure rate, Gallup says your failure rate on initiatives will probably be roughly 70 to 72%. Because you've got to have the stakeholders buy in, and to buy in, they have to be able to speak up and be heard. And then I will close out with this. I had an artist do this deck when we made the book, and this is probably like my favorite graphic that we've ever produced. C.S. Lewis wrote a book besides The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I'll let you try to figure out which book it is. But in the book, I was in Cancun, like on a day bed, like watching the surf, and I was reading this book, and I was just blown away. He's like, I'll paraphrase it, I won't be able to say it exactly, but he said, you have two options. You could either search for comfort or you could search for the truth. And most everyone will take comfort. Because the road to comfort is straight, it's easy. When I got off stage and I went over to you and said, hey, what did you think of my speech? What did you say? Right? Like, it was great, right? I probably know my speech sucked, right? I mean, like, I probably noticed that no one was paying attention, but I will stick with that answer, and I will walk to the back, and I will take my microphone off, and I will be done because that makes me feel good. And what C.S. Lewis argued was, that's the easy way out, and it leads to pain, right? Because that guy is going to get up over and over and over and keep doing that same awful PowerPoint and that awful presentation style. And the only way to truly find comfort is to search for truth. So as an example, right, there's not a lot of us in here, so we can like open it up to the crowd. What would have been a way that I could have searched for truth when I asked her that question? Yeah. Right, ask what you could have done better. When I started POPin, I came up with this theory, right, that there's goodwill, which is, hey, you did great, right? And then there's truth. So for any of you, I know there's a lot of young people that are starting companies in here, right? I have this theory after starting 4 companies, having a couple exits and stuff like that. I said, hey, I'm going to make this crowdsourcing product that's going to allow you to find out the truth on anything that's happening in your org. Anything. You want to know the truth of why people are quitting. You want to know the truth of why projects are failing. You want to know the right people to recognize. How much would you pay if I could put a person on your staff that every time you ask them what's going on, they could 100% give you the truth? They're like, oh, I'd pay a lot for that. Am I searching for the truth or am I searching for comfort? In that question. I pay a lot for that. Does that mean I should go start the company? Because I did that once. I started a company when my friends and family told me I had a good idea, and it ate crap like 3 years later. If you're searching for truth instead of just goodwill, what should your follow-up question be? Wow, that's a great idea. I really like that. What should you say? If you're going to bet your family on this startup, that's a good question. What I ask is, how much money would you give me for it right now? And usually the response is, what? Come again? No. Well, if it's such a great idea, here's the wireframes for how it would look. Would you give me $10K to get it started? Because I started a company once without asking that question, and here's what I got. I'm going to start this company. Me and my friend are betting our families on this. We're going to go ahead and start it. Would you buy from us? Yes, I absolutely would. Okay, we start the company, mortgage the homes, do all these things. We go and ask for the order from these 3 clients. Actually, purchasing's not adding new vendors right now. Got that from all 3 clients. We eventually were able to make it work. Turned out okay, but we probably lagged a full 8 months just doing triage and trying to figure out how to get them. When we started POPin, I asked 3 separate CIOs, would you give us funding for this? Because you just told me as I whiteboarded it that it's a great idea. And we got 3 $10,000 checks before we ever started. And then you're kind of screwed because you're like, well, I guess I got to do it now. But that is the difference between, in business, like searching for comfort or searching for truth. If you stop at one question, you're not really looking for the truth. If you ask a team how they feel about something, that's good. If you ask them how they would solve something, that's even better. If you'd ask them even another question after that, that's even better. So we really talk about with crowdsourcing, right? Crowdsourcing is great to use and do discovery, but it's great for digging deeper once you get those discovery answers. And then it's even better for sharing the authorship on how to do the solves. Creates less work for the leader, you're getting closer to the truth, and what you really want with anything you roll out is a bought-in team when you roll it out, and the way to do that is to be inclusive the whole way. So share the risk, like I talked about with the story with my son. Admit you don't know everything, be vulnerable up on stage, don't solve everyone's problems, just go ahead and give your perspective on it, and then when you do have something hard to do, don't stop as, hey, how was my speech? Talk about how you can improve. Talk about what were the things that I didn't do well. Ask for that money if you're going to be doing something kind of hard as a startup. Bunch of stuff like that in the book. If you're interested, it's on Amazon. And if you're interested in POPin, it's popinnow.com. Love to work with you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Case. Well, what you said is really, really important, because that unspoken, like even like when you look at sales, a lot of people, they think it's the price issue, they think it's the competition, they think a lot of things, but that unspoken, that you don't get it. Because as you said, like, people are just nice, telling you like, oh yeah, but then they're not,
Yeah,
not
so
satisfied.
I had a lot of these guys in my breakout. The other thing we'll do, and Susanna runs as our VP of sales at POP, and what we'll do is we'll stop. If any of you saw my presentation this morning, we show a slide that shows a bridge that's disconnected, and we say, here's all the things you could use POPin for, and we stop and we say, does any of that resonate with you? And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, like we have a rollout that we did, a project, and it's totally stalled, and we don't know what to do now.
Yeah.
And we'll ask right there, what would stop you from moving forward with the product right now then? And I learned this. The first thing they say is never true, right? But always, it's like throwing a bone down the road for a dog and you want to chase it. You have to ask them, what would stop you from moving forward? And then you say, what else? What else? What else? What else? And usually by the fifth or sixth thing, you have the real reason of what's going to stop them. But it's once again just it's comfort versus the truth, right?
Yeah.
You got to dig in if you're really going to figure out what's going on.
Committed to dig that right answer that you wanted to get. Yeah, not getting comfort. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.